Hello. I have been wanting to make a video talking about this thing, but I haven't yet been able to sit down and construct my thoughts in like a clear way. But I feel the urge to just speak, just say something, and just feel what it feels like to get my words out. So bear with me, but stick around because I think it's going to be interesting. So I want to talk about, as briefly as possible, the senses. It kind of speaks to the name of this page, all the senses, why thinking and talking about the senses has become so important to me. And there's this thought that has been drifting by, has been coming into my understanding slowly, and I just want to feel it out a bit. I won't go as deeply as I want to about the senses in general. That will be maybe eventually later, but for now, let's talk about this topic of the sense of sight. So I've been thinking about sight a lot because of the work I've been doing with my dissertation. And there was a point where my supervisor brought brought this idea to my notice, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. And it's how much knowledge is constructed in terms of sight, and at least within Western English constructs of knowledge. And when I say Western, I mean like the cultures that use English primarily and have a particular history of power, relationship with power in the world. Um, I think you understand what I mean when I say Western, but that's whatever for now. But like, I can't help but think about how much the idea of knowledge is constructed around the sense of sight. How, when we say, when we want to say I know something, how easy it is to say I see, or I don't know. I'm trying to. For some reason, the examples are not coming to me right now. But it just feels like so much of our language around knowledge is about visibility. Um, we use the words like vivid to say that we understand something clearly. Um, we talk about the enlightenment or bringing things to light. There's so many. We talk about lens, seeing things through a lens. There's so many more, but I can't think of the examples right now. But if you just sit down and think about it, you might come to your awareness. And it's interesting to me because I think because of how this is constructed, how much the sense of sight becomes central to knowledge, how we know things. And when I say knowledge, I mean how like the things how we think about knowing, like the things we know, how we think about what we ought to know, how to know, who can know, what knowing even is. So much of that, of these constructs, how we encode ideas about our world, come from a particular construct, and it reflects in our language the way, yeah, like the way I have come to understand that the way we encode the world shows up in so many aspects of our lives and very, very evidently in language. And I think in English language, there's a study that was done that the Western concepts of knowledge have encoded um, knowledge in language in a hierarchized way. No. Let me go back. A lot of Western concepts of the senses are encoded in a hierarchized way. So, sight, the sense of sight, is seen as like the topmost, most evident way of grasping the world, meaning that everybody, when you think about knowing anything, what you see is kind of the most obvious thing to you, and it has a lot to do with the way we speak. So the sense of sight becomes prioritized because our language also prioritizes the sense of sight, and that makes us believe that sight is the most obvious way of grasping the world. And so everything that we create centers around what we can see. Over and over again, this shows up, and because of that, we assume that sight is just the most obvious thing. But studies have shown, and I will link the article I read that really blew my mind. Studies have shown that in other languages and other cultures, sight isn't as prioritized. Sight isn't the most obvious way of seeing things, and the senses that are supposed to be like the lesser obvious senses in English language are actually quite evident and uniformly understood in other cultures and languages. So, for example, in English, it's very easy for English speakers to point at colors and agree on like categories of colors or categories of things that you name through like some visual aids because the language encodes the visual so uniformly and stuff like so everybody can point see a red sign a stop sign, sorry, and agree that the color is red. But when it comes to other senses like the olfactory, as in what you can smell, what you can taste and touch, those are assumed as less evident because our language doesn't encode those senses as uniformly. So in other cultures and other languages, they have words like abstracted words to describe senses of smell that everybody can agree on, that shows up in like multiple materials and objects. So like while an English speaker would say something like it smells like cinnamon or it smells like um, freshly cut grass, for example, a different culture, that smell of freshly cut grass appears in like there's a something about the smell that has been abstracted and has been understood in that language, and it appears in other materials, and you can and that's that. And I don't know, like I don't have the concrete examples because it's not a language I understand, but I think they studied some languages around Thailand and Malaysia where they had words like these that encoded the sense of smell, where that same smell can be found in many other materials because people are able to agree on what that smell is uniformly because they have an abstracted understanding of that smell. Same as touch, same as taste. There's different languages that encode different senses in different ways. And I just find it so interesting about like when I think about how the sense of sight, because that is how we think about the world through what we can see, how that affects what we are able to understand and what we are able to acknowledge as real, as reality. Um, how like and this shows up in Oyewumi Oyeronke's work where she writes about the invention of women. There's a chapter in that book that talks about visualizing the body, and she points out this thing, and it was my supervisor that pointed out to me in the first place, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. That Western concepts of knowledge are encoded um so much inside that the body becomes something you understand only through what you can point at and see. So, and that is how also like all other categories kind of work in this same culture, in these constructs, where the body comes is about what you can see, how it is displayed, how you can point at parts, what those parts mean, how they are categorized. It changes so much of how we come to understand human beings, living beings of all kinds, because whatever you can see becomes how you categorize, as opposed to other kinds of frameworks and cultures where the body didn't stand as the appearance, like just the physical appearance of what could be pointed at, but it represented so much more because the body wasn't central in how to categorize and understand people. So difference was understood in terms of things like hearing in a lot of African language in African cultures, because so that people would know who their like community members were based on, for example, the languages they spoke or how they sounded, as opposed to how they looked. You understand? Anyway, I can't help but think about how much the sense of sight plays into the ways we understand knowledge, even in like the sciences, how the sciences have developed. It seems to me, at least, I'm not a scientist, but from the studies and just observing, when we even use the word observation, because observation is something that is apparently like the kind of basis of scientific method. Even when we talk about things like observation, the first thing that people think about is what they can see. And even when what is being observed isn't necessarily in the realm of sight, for example, if you're observing how smells affect people or something like that, it is still somehow like reduced to something that can be seen, which is why like discoveries or inventions like the microscope have been so central in scientific questions and knowledge production. It's somehow always going to be reduced to what you can see. And I think the bulk of my work right now is just thinking and talking about, or trying to understand how the ways we encode knowledge affect the way we experience the world. I think that is these are the questions I find myself always asking. Like, what happens when um, we don't shape the world with this hierarchy of senses, where the sense of sight seems to be prevalent in everything in how we understand the world, and we come to a more like holistic sense of the senses, where we take seriously like a holistic experience of the world and how that changes the way we move through it and um, think about it. Like the work I'm doing right now, the paper I've been writing for the past year has been about time. And this idea comes into play when I think about how much like our time system has been um, co-opted primarily by clock time, so that when we think about time, we can only really think about it in terms of what symbols we look at on the clock. So where is the hand of the clock showing? What number is even showing on our phones? Because we don't even use analog clocks anymore. So it's just what number just appears on your phone, and that's the time you're in. And you're prioritizing the sense of sight, even a reduced sense of sight, in my opinion, but like it's still a sense of sight, as opposed to what if time could be understood as more than what number you can see on a phone, but what you can smell, what you can feel, what you can taste. And if we took a holistic sense of the senses more seriously, like we took it seriously, and it was the way we move through the world, like how much would change about the systems we build and what we would create and how we would see difference. And I feel like it's so hard to make a video like this because my thoughts are just kind of all over the place, and I think this can be so much better, and I will like endeavor to like get my thoughts through like a more synthesized framework, whatever it is. Maybe a video, maybe a paper. I just really just wanted to talk about it and just like, I don't know, speak to whoever is listening, just to think about the senses and how they affect the way we live and why things are the way they are, and kind of like ask questions that draw out constructs that we have been moving through and taking for granted because they seem like the only way to think about the world. Okay, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed listening to this long one. My name is Sesnu, and this is a page about moving through the senses more seriously, more with more awareness, and what changes when we do that. Okay, bye.